Welcome to week 2, guys. I hope you're excited for this week. We are going to kick it off with a chili. So chili is super easy to make it your own, and you can add whatever you like. So you can add more veg, you can try and add some veggie mince is usually really good. You can add more spice. Really, it's so versatile. You can just make it your own. So don't feel like you need to add it spicy, and go ahead and mix it up as you please. So to start off with, wash your guys' veg and peel your carrots, whatever else you need peeled, and I will meet you back in the kitchen. So to begin, we're going to grab our onion, and you can just give it a roll to try and get that skin off, and then just peel it. I like to cut off just the one end. It usually helps me peel the onion. And you can use whatever color you want. It doesn't have to be a white onion, doesn't have to be yellow. It's just kind of your preference. I like to just buy a big bulk pack of onions, and I pretty much cook with them all the time because it just adds a really nice base flavor, but you don't even have to cook with them if you don't want. So once you get all of the bits off peeled that you want, we're going to be dicing it. So I always like to start by creating a flat surface, and then I'm just gonna very carefully cut close to the end, but not all the way. This might take a little practice to get used to, but it will save you a lot of time when you start cutting your onion. So just, again, cut nice and close to our root, but not all the way through. And then we're just gonna slice it down. And then when it comes time, it's already all diced for us. Okay, so then you can just go through and make sure all the bits are cut as we need them. And if you have to, you can take a break. If your onion is really strong, you don't want to be cutting when you can't see. So I definitely need to take a break here. And then you just want to cut up, again, all of the bits that don't look like they've been fully cut through. And then we can just put them in a bowl off to the side. Whew. Just gonna, strong onions today. And then we can prep our carrots. So they should be peeled already. And then we are just gonna wanna cut them. If your carrots are quite thick, you can cut them in half. Mine are pretty thin, so I'm just going to dice them into nice small chunks. Just gonna put that bad boy over there. So if you decide not to add carrots, you can also add something like celery is usually quite good in chili, or you can add extra bell peppers. You can pretty much just add any veg that you would like in a chili. And then we're gonna go ahead and prep this pepper. Again, you can cut it however you want. Mine is very unconventional, but that's just the way I like to do it, because then I can just pop out all the seeds. So always just be very mindful when you are cutting and using knives at all in the kitchen. You also usually want to make sure your knives are nice and sharp, because the sharper the knife, it's actually a lot safer. because that way you're not forcing your knife and using too much pressure. You can just easily cut. So I'm gonna cut the peppers into just bite-sized chunks, and I'm just using one pepper today. It can be whatever color you want it to be. Okay, so next you can just get your garlic out, and you can use 2 to 3 cloves. If you know you like it more garlicky, feel free to add it in. If you know you don't really want it that garlicky, or you have a hot date, maybe leave it out. So we're just gonna squish it and cut off the end, and that way it'll peel nice and quick. And just repeat that with the rest of them. So we're just gonna mince our garlic into nice small pieces. If you have a garlic press or mincer, whatever they are called, you can choose to use those as well. I am just going to cut it into small pieces. Okay. So again, my trick is find the flat side, turn it up, and then very carefully, you're going to just thinly slice the garlic, and then turn it onto its flat side and do the same thing. Just very carefully slice it, and then you can just cut it into small pieces. Okay, so once we have your garlic done, if you have decided to use a fresh chili or a jalapeno, you can get those out now, and we're gonna prep these last. That way our knife doesn't get infused with too much spice, and we can just leave it on here. So you can choose to use it with seeds or without seeds. If you leave the seeds in, it's gonna be a lot spicier than if you remove them. You can also choose to use maybe half a jalapeno, half a chili. It's just gonna be your own preference. But I am going to just remove the insides and remove the seeds of my jalapeno. So I am also going to be using a cubed stock today. So I needed some hot water. So if you guys have a kettle or are using a cubed stock, I would just turn that on so that way it is getting ready for when we will need it. And if you don't like spicy, then I would recommend just not using any chili or any jalapeno. You don't need it in this recipe. So I'm just going to cut this. I've cut it in half, and then I'm actually just going to slice it And that will be fine for me. I don't mind having bigger chunks because jalapeno, when it cooks down, it's not gonna be quite as spicy. If you have chilies, I would recommend doing a lot smaller of pieces because those will be a lot hotter. We're going to turn our stove on to about medium heat, and we're gonna add 1 to 2 tablespoons of oil. We're gonna wanna let our pot heat up as well as the oil. In the meantime, you can make sure that you have your onions because we will be adding those first. For our spice mix, we're gonna use chili powder. I'm gonna use 1 tablespoon. Oops. That's why I did it over there. So 1 tablespoon of chili powder. If you like yours less spicy, add less. If you like yours more spicy, then you can add more. I'm gonna use 1 tablespoon of cumin. And then I'm just gonna quickly add the onions into our pot. So we're gonna just let those sit and cook for 3 to 4 minutes. And then we're gonna add in the rest of our veg. So we'll just continue with our spice mix. So we're gonna add a teaspoon of paprika. I'm actually gonna add about 1.5 teaspoons of paprika because I know I personally like the flavor. And then we're gonna add 1 teaspoon of oregano. And you're gonna wanna add 2 teaspoons of turmeric. And that is the spice mix there. So now you're just gonna wanna keep an eye on your onion, and I'm also gonna recommend that you get out your beans. So I have 2 cans of beans here. I'm using black beans and a medley. You can use whatever beans you want. Kidney beans are also really good in this. These are going to bring your protein and fiber to this meal. So just go ahead and get a can opener and open up your beans, and you're gonna wanna rinse them. So drain them into a strainer and give them a rinse. So because carrots are a little bit harder, I'm gonna go ahead and add them in. So we're gonna go ahead and just add in the rest of our veg, and we're gonna add in the garlic and the jalapenos or chili. And then just give it a nice stir. Those to cook for a few minutes, and then we're gonna get our spices ready, and we're gonna add our spices as well as a little bit of maple syrup, and then we're gonna be adding in our stock and our diced tomatoes. So make sure that if you need hot water for your stock, you can get that ready, and we can also get it mixed in. So I'm just gonna use a bowl, and we're gonna wanna use around 1 cup of stock. So while you're preparing all these other things, you can be opening your tomatoes, get those ready, get your stock ready, and just make sure that you're still keeping an eye on your pot. So you wanna make sure that you're giving the veg a stir and making sure that it's not too hot, that it's burning. So make sure you're also taking in the smells, and if you've never used some of these spices, don't be afraid to just smell it all in. You can even put a little bit on your finger and just give it a taste. Really get familiar with what you're cooking, and don't be afraid to try new things. So I'm going to just use my can opener and open up a tin of tomatoes. So you're just gonna wanna use around a 400 milliliter can of tomatoes. So you don't have to use canned tomatoes. You can use fresh tomatoes. I would just use maybe 2 or 3, the equivalent to about 400 milliliters, and just dice them up so that way they are ready to go in. So now I'm just gonna take our spice mix, and we're just gonna add that right in. You can also add a little bit of your stock here and give it a good mix. So I added about 2 tablespoons worth of stock, and now I'm just gonna mix the spices in. I'm actually gonna add another tablespoon just to give the spices a bit of moisture. So we're gonna wanna let those sink in for about a minute, and then it should be all good. So after that, you can also get out your tomato paste, and we're gonna add 2 tablespoons worth of that. So now we can get our stock and our tomatoes ready. So we're gonna wanna use 1 tin of tomatoes, about 400 milliliters, and 1 cup of stock. can get out either a tablespoon of brown sugar, or I love to use maple syrup when I cook, and you just want to add in a tablespoon of that and really stir it all in and incorporate it. If you guys are finding that your chili is really thick, you can always add in another cup of stock. And also, because we're adding in our beans, it is a good idea to have a little bit more liquid in there. So I'm actually going to add another cup of stock into the chili. And then we're just gonna wanna turn it down low, and we're just gonna let it simmer for about 5 to 7 minutes. Just turn it down to maybe a low to medium heat. Let it simmer for 5 minutes, and then we're gonna come back and we'll add in all of our beans. So while that is simmering, it's a good idea to be preparing your corn. So if you're using fresh corn, just make sure you get it up and boiling. That way it can cool down and you can just cut it. If you're using a can, you can just get the can ready, have it open. And then after it's been simmering for about 5 minutes, we're going to add in all of our beans as well as the corn. So we're going to let that simmer for about 5 minutes or so. This chili is a very hearty recipe. You can always adapt it and either add maybe 1 less can of beans, you can add more tomatoes, you can just make it however you want. And you can serve it with rice, you can have it with bread and butter, just really however you prefer to have your chili. I want to thank you guys for continuing to better yourself on this flexitarian journey. And really this week, I want to focus on patience, because good things are going to take time. And I really want you to be kind and patient with yourself and, with others and with your food. It's going to be really important as we continue to grow and learn that you do it with patience and with kindness. It is such a virtue in life, even though it's overlooked so often. It really is so important for yourself. And when you're on a journey of learning and growing, you need patience. So, you know what? Enjoy the ride, guys. Enjoy the learning. And remember, it's not about this person's looks like that or that person's Insta. It's not about that. Just enjoy the ride and have some patience and kindness to yourself. And I will see you for our next recipe.